Picture this. A woman stands in the center of a grand ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people applauding, cameras flashing, champagne glasses raised in celebration. Her husband, the man she built an empire with, steps up to the microphone. The room falls silent. And then he says the words that will shatter her world. "Please, stop calling her my wife. It feels like an insult to me." The applause continues. But for her, time stops. This is the story of Catherine Hayes, a woman who gave everything for love, only to discover that love had an expiration date she never knew existed. How does a marriage that survived poverty, sleepless nights, and impossible odds end in public humiliation? What turns a devoted husband into a stranger who erases you from his story? And more importantly, what happens when the woman everyone underestimated decides she's done being invisible? Tonight, we're going to walk through the life of a woman who learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones writing your exit from their narrative. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the moment you realize you've been playing a supporting role in your own life and the terrifying, liberating decision to rewrite the script. Stay with me because what Catherine discovered in the aftermath of that ballroom will make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, ambition, and the price of silence. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let's go back to where it all began. 15 years earlier, Catherine Mitchell was a 28-year-old graphic designer working out of a cramped studio apartment in Chicago. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't connected. But she had something rare. She believed in people's potential more than they believed in themselves. That's how she met David Hayes. He was 31, working 2 jobs, drowning in student debt from a failed business degree, and pitching a tech startup idea that everyone else had laughed out of the room. Everyone except Catherine. She saw something in his eyes that night at a mutual friend's birthday party. Something hungry and desperate and honest. They talked until 4 a.m. about his vision for a platform that would revolutionize small business logistics. By sunrise, she'd offered to design his entire brand identity for free. 6 months later, they were dating. A year after that, they were married in a courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses and a bouquet from the corner store. The early years were beautiful in the way struggle can be beautiful when you're not alone in it. Catherine worked her design job during the day and spent her nights building David's website, crafting pitch decks, managing social media, answering customer emails. David coded, networked, pitched to investors who kept saying no. They ate ramen 4 nights a week. They celebrated small victories like their first paying client with a bottle of cheap wine on their fire escape. Catherine's friends started asking when she'd focus on her own career. Her mother worried she was sacrificing too much, but Catherine believed. She believed in David. She believed in them. And when Hayes Logistics finally got its first major investment 3 years into their marriage, when David's platform started getting attention from major retailers, when money finally started flowing in, Catherine felt vindicated. They'd done it together. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt overcome. This was their victory, theirs. But something subtle began to shift. Success has a way of rewriting history, and in the new version of events that David started telling at networking events and in magazine interviews, Catherine's role began to shrink. "I bootstrapped this company from nothing," he'd say. Technically true. But the nothing had included Catherine's free labor, her emotional support, her belief when no one else believed. She told herself it didn't matter. The marriage mattered. Their partnership mattered. The details of who got credit were trivial compared to what they'd built together. That's what she told herself. For years, that's what she believed. David's mother, Patricia Hayes, entered their lives like winter fog, slow and suffocating. She'd been largely absent during the struggling years, offering nothing but criticism about David's choices and thinly veiled disapproval of Catherine's middle-class background. But success has a way of bringing family members out of the woodwork. 2 years after Hayes Logistics went public, Patricia moved from Arizona to Chicago, explaining that she wanted to be closer to her only son now that he'd finally made something of himself. Catherine tried to be welcoming. She set up a guest room in their new house. She invited Patricia to family dinners. She smiled through the comments about her cooking, her wardrobe choices, her decision not to have children yet. "You're focused on the wrong things, dear," Patricia would say, her voice honey-sweet and blade-sharp. "David needs a wife who understands his position now. He needs someone who can move in the circles he's moving in." Catherine would find David after these conversations, looking for solidarity, for defense, for acknowledgement that his mother's words were out. But David would just sigh, tired from work, and say, "She means well. You know how mothers are." No. Catherine didn't know. Because her mother had never made her feel small for being herself. Over the next year, Patricia became a constant presence. She attended company events. She joined David for investor meetings. She started calling herself an advisor, though her advice always seemed to center on one theme. Catherine wasn't good enough for this new world they inhabited. And slowly, subtly, David started listening. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big fight, no clear moment when everything changed. It was small things. David stopped asking Catherine's opinion on business decisions. He stopped mentioning her contributions when people asked about the company's origin story. He started attending events alone, saying Catherine wouldn't enjoy them, wouldn't fit in, wouldn't understand the conversations. Patricia filled the space Catherine vacated, standing beside David in photos, introducing him to influential people, shaping his image. Catherine tried to talk to him about it. "I feel like I'm disappearing," she said one night. David looked at her with something that might have been pity or might have been impatience. "You're being paranoid," he said. "Nothing's changed. I'm just busy." But everything had changed. Catherine just didn't know how much yet. The gala was supposed to celebrate Hayes Logistics' 10th anniversary, a decade of innovation, growth, success. Catherine spent weeks planning her outfit, a midnight blue dress that made her feel elegant and visible in a way she hadn't felt in months. She arrived at the ballroom on David's arm, and for a moment it felt like old times. The room was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, an orchestra playing soft jazz. David seemed happy, relaxed. He introduced her to people, kept his hand on the small of her back. Catherine let herself hope that maybe things were turning around. Maybe she'd been wrong to worry. Maybe Patricia's influence was waning. Maybe David was remembering who they used to be. The speeches started after dinner. Colleagues praised David's vision. Investors talked about his innovative spirit. And then David took the stage. Catherine watched from her table, pride swelling in her chest despite everything. This was still her husband. This was still the man she'd believed in when no one else did. David talked about the journey, the struggles, the victories. He thanked his team. He thanked his investors. He thanked his mother Patricia, who stood beside the stage beaming, soaking in reflected glory. And then David's eyes swept the room, landing on Catherine for just a moment before moving on. "I know many of you have questions about my personal life," he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "And I want to address something tonight. There's been some confusion, some outdated information circulating." Catherine's heart began to pound. What was he talking about? "The woman you may have seen me with at previous events, Catherine, she's someone who was part of my past. But I want to make something clear. Please stop calling her my wife. It feels like an insult to me, to the man I've become, to the future I'm building." The room erupted in applause, not shocked gasps, not confused silence. Applause, as if David had just announced something admirable, something brave. Catherine sat frozen. The words didn't make sense. She was his wife. Legally. Actually. They'd never discussed divorce. They'd never discussed separation. How could he erase her existence with a sentence and have people applaud? David continued talking, something about moving forward, about new chapters, but Catherine couldn't hear anymore. The applause faded into white noise. She looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone who looked as confused as she felt. But people were smiling, nodding. Patricia was crying happy tears, and David was looking at his mother, not at Catherine, not once at Catherine. Catherine doesn't remember leaving the ballroom, doesn't remember the drive home. She remembers sitting in their bedroom, still in the midnight blue dress, staring at her hands, and trying to understand what had just happened. David came home near midnight. He looked surprised to see her still awake. "We need to talk," Catherine said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, hollow and distant. David sighed, loosening his tie. "Can this wait? It's been a long night. You told 300 people I'm not your wife." "Catherine, don't be dramatic. I was clarifying our situation." "What situation?" "We're married. We've been married for 14 years. David sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. "Things have changed. I've changed. The company has changed. You have to understand, the image I need to project now, it's different from who I was when we started." "Image? David, we built this together. I was there. I worked just as hard as you did. You did some design work. I appreciate that. But let's not rewrite history. This company succeeded because of my vision, my execution, my decisions." Catherine felt something crack inside her chest. "Your mother put these words in your mouth." "My mother sees things clearly. She understands the world we're in now. She understands what I need." And what you need is to humiliate me publicly, to erase me from our story? David stood up, his patience clearly exhausted. I need you to understand reality. We've grown apart. This marriage was right for who I was then. It's not right for who I am now. My lawyers will contact you about the divorce proceedings. He left the room, left the house, left Catherine sitting in the dark in a dress that suddenly felt like a costume for a role she no longer had. Catherine spent 3 days in shock. Then anger set in, then something sharper than anger, curiosity. If David wanted to rewrite their history, Catherine decided she had every right to know the true story. She started digging. She still had access to the company's early email accounts, the ones from when she'd been managing communications. She found old investor pitch decks, the ones she designed. She found emails between David and early investors, emails where he'd explicitly credited her as co-founder. She found financial records showing that her personal savings had funded the company's incorporation. And then, she found something else. Email chains between David and Patricia, going back 3 years. Messages where Patricia outlined a strategy. You need a wife who matches your status now. Catherine is holding you back, but you need to be careful about the divorce. She could claim half the company. We need to discredit her first, make her seem unstable, make her seem irrelevant. Then when the divorce happens, no one will question it. There were more emails, suggestions about gaslighting Catherine, about isolating her from friends, about slowly erasing her from the company narrative. And David had followed the playbook perfectly. Catherine sat back in her chair, the emails glowing on her laptop screen. She wasn't heartbroken anymore. She was calm, clear. She'd spent 14 years believing in someone who'd spent the last 3 plotting her erasure. But here's what David and Patricia hadn't counted on. Catherine Mitchell, the girl who'd worked her way through design school, who'd built a business from nothing, who'd believed in a dream when no one else did, that girl was still in there, and she'd just been reminded what she was capable of. David wanted a clean divorce where he kept everything, and Catherine faded quietly into the background. Catherine had other plans. She copied every email, every financial record, every piece of evidence showing her contributions to the company. Then she called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the best family law attorney in Chicago. The one who specialized in cases where spouses tried to hide assets during divorce. I need you to tell me something honestly, Catherine said during their first meeting. Can I win this? The lawyer looked at the evidence Catherine had compiled, looked at her, smiled. Mrs. Hayes, you're not just going to win, you're going to rewrite the entire story. The divorce took 8 months. Catherine fought for every penny, every recognition, every truth. The emails went public through legal filings. News outlets picked up the story of the wife erased by her successful husband and his manipulative mother. Public opinion shifted dramatically. David's reputation took a hit. Patricia's involvement became a punchline. And Catherine emerged not as a victim, but as a survivor who'd refused to let someone else write her ending. In the settlement, she received 40% of Hayes' logistics, enough to make her independently wealthy. She started her own company, a consultancy helping other women in business protect their contributions and their futures. But more than the money or the vindication, Catherine gained something else. The unshakable knowledge that she'd never again make herself small for someone else's comfort. The woman who'd stood frozen in that ballroom still existed, but she'd evolved into someone stronger. Someone who'd learned that love without respect is just another word for betrayal, and that the most important story you'll ever tell is the true one about yourself. So tell us, what would you have done in Catherine's place? Would you have fought back, or walked away quietly? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, reminded you of your own strength or someone you know, share it, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that we're never as powerless as someone wants us to believe. Thanks for watching. Until next time.